We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's November 6th here in Seoul. I'm Shin-Yoon, and you're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is Chiji.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, and Nell Song.
Hi.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Buying groceries is getting tougher with higher than ever food prices. In particular, we've seen milk prices reach their highest in 14 years. Compared to a year ago, consumer prices for milk jumped by 14.3% in October. That's why officials on Sunday pledged to form a task force to closely monitor 7 food products that have recently seen a surge in prices. This includes instant noodles, bread, and even coffee. Bed bugs have quickly spread across Korea. The bed bug infestation started in mid-September when a student reported having been bitten by them at a dorm in Daegu City. Now we're hearing more reports of them even in the capital, Seoul, and city officials on Sunday said they've received 17 reports. To prevent the further spread of these pests, Seoul City has allocated a total of $380,000, and the city has been dispatching disinfection service companies to more than 3,000 public facilities or neighborhoods with poor sanitation levels. Moving on to our last story. Croatian Foreign Minister Gordon Grlic-Radman has been in the center of controversy following an awkward attempt to kiss his German counterpart, Annalena Baerbock, during a group photo session at an EU conference. A video capturing the moment shows how 65-year-old Radman first shakes the hand of the German Foreign Minister, then tries to kiss her on the cheek. But as Baerbock awkwardly dodges it, it became cheek-to-cheek contact. Now, since this video went viral, Radman has received much backlash. Many said the Croatian foreign minister's actions might have been inappropriate and crossed personal boundaries, as it seemed as if his German counterpart did not give him prior consent. To such controversy, Radman said he had already apologized to the German foreign minister. At the same time, though, he expressed his bafflement and explained that he had no other intention other than trying to be friendly to his colleague. Now, here in the studio, what do you guys think about the way people are reacting to this incident?
I mean, there are places where this is kind of a regular way of greeting in, certain areas, but for international conferences, there definitely is this unspoken guideline of handshake, something kind of clean, especially when it's with the opposite sex. And whatever the case is, I mean, she clearly looks completely uncomfortable in the picture, and everybody around seems uncomfortable as well. So yeah, so apology was in order, and I don't know, maybe if he should be really talking publicly about his bafflement.
Right, and no matter what your intention is, I think if the other person feels a little uncomfortable, these personal boundaries must be kept. Where do you stand on this?
Well, as Nell said, there are occasions or places where these ways of greeting could be a way of showing friendliness, right? It's a way of being friendly. However, this recent incident, I believe, was a lack of respect for personal space, boundaries, as well as the cultural differences. And especially for public officials, and especially during professional settings like these, it's essential to really respect personal space as well as to respect the cultural difference of the other. So I believe this incident in particular was undermining the seriousness of a diplomatic interaction, and it was quite invasive.
Right, and I completely agree. Like, it's places like this when you're representing a country, and I think a lot of people were throwing a lot of backlash towards the Croatian foreign minister because he's representing a country and his behavior wasn't the best of conduct because, as we mentioned, it was crossing personal boundaries and there seemed to be no consent. Now, in the meantime, that was our news feed for this Monday. Let's switch gears to our main discussion topic of the day: romance scams. This is a hot keyword making headlines in Korea these days. Why? My AI voice secretary will let you know.
Last week, police detained the former fiancé of Olympic fencing medalist Nam Hyun-hee for investigation on charges of fraud. Nam's ex-fiancé, Jeon Chung-jo, claimed to be a third-generation son from the Paradise conglomerate, born out of wedlock. Jeon also claimed to be a transgender male and claimed to have impregnated the South Korean Olympic fencing medalist. But police found out that Jeon had never gone through sex transformation surgery. Nam and Jeon's story has shed light onto growing social issue romance scams. This is when a fraudster manipulates their victims by abusing their affection and trust. The National Police Agency has found that as of the beginning half of last year, 8 out of 10 romance scam victims were those in their 30s or younger.
Romance scams. We've recently seen one that made many here in Korea raise their eyebrows, mainly because the victim was a two-time Olympic medalist. And we've mentioned this romance scam story a few times on our news feed and just now in our VCR. But let's fill in our viewers with the full angles and the latest on this story too.
Sure. So for those of you who are not very familiar with the story, like you mentioned, Nam Yeon-hee is a former national fencer of Korea, and she announced her marriage to this third-generation chaebol. And chaebol, as we know, are the conglomerates here in the country and family members of the conglomerates who are really rich usually, and who was 15 years younger than Nam Yeon-hee. However, the groom-to-be turned out to be a fraudster. So both of them were interviewed while announcing their marriage, and Chun's past and fraudulent history were revealed by her acquaintances, netizens, investigators, and the media. And it was revealed that Chun was not a third-generation chaebol, and in fact, his gender was female instead of male. And also, it was revealed that she had criminal records in the past of other frauds. But now there are also claims that Nam Yeon-hee could have been part of the whole fraud as well. So this is something that we are continuously investigating, and we'll have updates on it. But anyway, it started as a romance scam.
It definitely snowballing here. We first thought Nam Yeon-hee was a victim, but now speculations that she could have been a part of it, right? Would you like to add on to the latest of this story?
Right. I mean, the fact that we were talking about Nam Yeon-hee and how she was tricked, but so many of the things, like, for example, she believed that she was pregnant by this transgender male who is still legally a female.
Who didn't go through sex change surgery.
Did not go through sex change surgery. Either way, pregnancy would have been impossible. But no matter how gaslit she was, she believed it. And so now we're speculating whether, she was kind of involved in tricking other people as well. But it turns out there are more than a dozen people who were scammed through Jeon Chong-jo, and the damage is more than 1.9 billion Korean won, which is about 1.4 million US dollars. And most of her other scams, Jeon Chong-jo's other scams, were also romance scams. And she approached men as women, and to women, she approached as a man. And I guess she confessed that she used all the money that she got through Nam Yeon-hee, and that's where we're at with investigations.
I mean, we are starting our discussion off by talking about the latest Nam Yeon-hee and Jeon Chong-jo scandal, but this is a romance scam, and we're seeing it very prevalent here in Korean society, mainly because our generation is often online.
Right.
And these romance scams often happen online, which is why most of their victims are in their 20s and 30s, right?
You're right. So romance scams are a form of fraud where people pretend to be in a romantic relationship, actually with the intention of financially exploiting their victim. So these scams are often carried out through social media platforms, like you said, and have become increasingly common during the pandemic as more people move their interactions online. And interestingly, while women account for 7 out of 10 victims, as you see on the screen, the majority of victims are under the age of 30, indicating that young people who are accustomed to online communication are particularly vulnerable to these types of scams. So as you see through this pie chart, it indicates that almost 90% of the victims of relationship scams are millennials and Gen Z, and that's mainly because they're more used to meeting new people online. And although some individuals like Chun, they take advantage of marriage fraud, many romance scams are actually carried out purely for financial gains as well.
Financial gains, and I recently read a survey on how the number is growing and growing. The younger the victims are getting, the more the scale of scams are growing and growing. Would you like to add on to that now?
Right. As Jihi mentioned, these scams take over the course of a few weeks, if not months. They kind of build on these emotional intimacy, and people are really vulnerable. And recently, there was even this incident where people were scammed by people impersonating their favorite K-pop idols or K-pop, K-drama actors. And so they would message them saying, oh, like, thank you so much for being my fan. I would love to come see you sometime. And for a while, it's crazy to think that your favorite star would message you. But because they're so insistent on messaging them and kind of proving themselves to them, eventually the victims kind of fall into that, and they would say things like, I would like to come see you in your country. Usually these are foreign fans, but it's kind of difficult to go through my company at the moment, so if you just kind of give me the money right now, my company will reimburse you when I get there. and they target lonely people, and some senior citizens even fall for this. Some senior citizens who are into K-drama. And yeah, I just really feel like it's really evil in that they target people's emotional vulnerabilities.
Exactly. I was going to mention that point as well. There's so many types of scams, but I think the violent part about romance scams is that you play with someone's emotions. And love makes you blind. We all know like that saying. And if you use that love element to really get what you want, especially like financial sums amount, I think that's what makes it really violent. But I'm quite curious as to whether it's only common here in Korea or abroad. That's why, to find out whether romance scams are as prevalent abroad, we asked our viewers to share their insights. Here's what 3 of them had to say. Take a look at the screen to find out. Let's start with Hannah. Hannah said, in Japan, romance investment scams are on the rise. In 2021, a woman in her 30s met a man on a dating app who convinced her to invest for their bright future. Unfortunately, after she lost a significant amount of money, the scammer disappeared, leaving her with nothing but heartbreak and financial ruin. Jiawi Ki said, I encountered such scams on Google Hangouts and Facebook all the time. The people will befriend you and then have requests for you to send them e-gift cards at your expense. Hal said, Instagram is very bad for these scams. In response, I turned bitter toward the interactions and do not respond. Now you can see like all of our viewers who I think they've mentioned a very key common point, which is that one can fall susceptible to these romance scams online. And we're seeing a lot of dating apps becoming prevailing. We're also seeing like just social media. You could easily interact and like directly message someone. But some people might not really understand how one can be so gullible or fall victim to these romance scams. A popular opinion found on articles related to Namyeoni and Jeon Chong-jo was that Nam seemed to be way too naive and gullible, and some even insulted the Olympic medalist, saying that she was stupid for becoming a victim. But what do you guys think? Do you guys understand, or can you sympathize with those who fall victim to these romance scams?
Well, personally, if these incidents happen, I don't think it's right to blame the victim, because whatever the situation may have been, I don't think it's the victim's fault for falling into this situation. And she could have been really in love, you know? And like you said, if we're in love, we often become blind and we don't become rational. We just believe the person for who they are, and we can get gaslit very easily. So I don't think it's good to or nice to blame the victim. But in this situation, I do want to kind of question Namhyun's, you know, sense of.
You do understand.
I do understand how people are saying,
skeptical.
they're saying Namhyun was too gullible.
But generally, you do sympathize with those who fall victim.
Yes.
What about you?
I mean, there's just been way too many red flags from day one, but Namhyun이 actually, we didn't mention this before, but recently got a divorce this year. And so she was really going through a lot of, you know, emotional turbulence. And you know, when we're really feeling lonely and somebody approaches, it doesn't matter who they are. If they're kind to us, we open up our hearts, and you become kind of dependent on them, which is exactly what these scammers do. They attack your vulnerability, and when you're opening up, they kind of start sending requests of, oh, if you really love me, you'll do this for me. And so you are already too dependent on this other person, and you're afraid that they might leave you. So you kind of become completely at their mercy, I guess.
And as we keep mentioning, I think social media plays a big part in it, because nowadays you just share your whole life for the internet to see, so they know when you're vulnerable and they know what your needs and wants are, which is easily why they can be manipulated. And though we may call these victims gullible or naive for falling for a stranger who seemingly popped out of nowhere and provided something too good to be true, there's still many questions as to why we're seeing an uptick in the number of romance scam victims, specifically those in their 20s and 30s. That's why we're going to ask a criminology and criminal justice expert to share her insights on this issue. Let's now include an assistant professor of criminology and criminal justice from the University of Texas at Arlington in our talks. She'll be pinpointing the most common romance scams methods used by fraudsters and comparing how prevalent such incidents are in the States. It's Professor Fangzhou Wang. Welcome to the show, Professor Wang.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
All right, so as you heard from our discussion just now, a lot of people seem to question how one can be so gullible and naive as to fall victim to a romance scam. But could you explain to us what goes through a victim's head and how he or she can easily be manipulated?
Yeah. So thank you for the invitation first. So the victims can get manipulated through three main ways. So first, emotional vulnerabilities. So scammers often target individuals who are emotionally vulnerable, such as those who have recently experienced a breakup, loss of a loved one, or other life challenges. They exploit those vulnerabilities by offering emotional support and understanding. And second is through love and affection. Romance scammers are very skilled at using romantic phrases and conversations to make the victims feel loved and cherished. And the last part is through fear and coercion. Scammers may use, different threats, guilt, or emotional manipulations to keep the victims engaged and prevent them from seeking help. So the victims in this relationship might, fear losing of the relationship with the scammers, or just simply feel embarrassed or fear, being retaliated by the scammers.
Right, Professor. So romance scams, as you heard in our talk, are a pressing issue in Korea. How common are they in the States, though?
So romance scams are indeed a prevalent issue not only in South Korea, but also in many other countries, including the States. So in 2022, according to the Federal Trade Commission Center, nearly 70,000 people reported a romance scam, and the reported loss hit a staggering 1.3 billion USD. So the median reported loss for each individual is $4,400. So as a result, this type of scam have become a significant concern in the States as well. And we should all know that these scams are not limited by any geographic boundaries and can affect people from different parts of the world.
Okay, Professor Wang, I'd like to ask you the last question. How can we better detect and prevent romance scams from happening to us? And are there any red flags to run away from in the early stages?
Sure. So I have three general tips to help the victims to avoid this type of scam. So the first tip is always watch out for fake profiles. So look for the signs of the fake or stolen photos, inconsistencies in the profile information, and profile with limited or generic content. Use reverse image search tools on Google to check if the photos appear somewhere else on the internet. The second tip is to avoid sharing personal information. Always do not share sensitive personal or financial information with anybody you just met online. And the last tip is to be cautious about the request for money. Never send money to somebody you just met online, even it's just for the reasons for medical bills, travel expenses, or just for the investment. Scammers may use different excuses to ask for money from the victims.
And I would like to add, don't blame yourself even if you do fall victim for it, because as you mentioned, Professor Wang, it's prevalent not only here in Korea, in all other parts of the world, and the three common methods that you mentioned does seem to be very manipulative, and it's really violent in the sense that it tackles one when they're at the most vulnerable state of mind. But thank you so much for the tips that you gave us today.
Of course. Thank you very much.
All right, and as Professor Wang mentioned, preventing romance scams seem to be critical, and she gave us 3 tips on how to do this. But do you guys have any of your own know-how or advice you'd like to give out to our viewers?
Well, other than the 3 tips that our professor provided us, I would like to add 2 more.
Okay.
And first of all, I would say take your time with the relationship. So often when you're emotionally vulnerable, you tend to lean to that person who provides that support and love and the emotions. But scammers, they often rush the relationship, pushing for quick emotional involvement so that they can quickly ask for financial support, right? So be skeptical of anyone who professes love or asks for money early in the relationship. And also keep personal information private. That's what our professor mentioned. So my second point would be to educate yourself and to stay informed about all these scam-related methods. And also this involves you being sharing your information, like relationship information with your friends and family, those who are really close to you, because they often help provide that perspective that you might be missing out on, you know?
So console your friends. I think they can always be a very good standard into whether you're going the right way with this person, and maybe they can have an objective perspective towards the relationship. What about you?
I feel like a common trait that we mentioned a lot on this show is the people of our generation feel quite lonely a lot of times, and finding that connection online may be exciting, but like Chi was mentioning, we really need to be careful if we're talking to strangers online. And as technology develops, I really feel like cybersecurity and the laws need to strengthen so that we can track these people down, because a lot of times when you lose money online these days, you can't get it back.
Exactly.
They're using foreign bank accounts, they're using different identities, so it's so difficult. So I guess for now, until the laws develop and the cybersecurity develops, just try not to talk to random strangers in general.
Better protect yourself online, though it's hard because our nickname is the Thumb Generation. But in the meantime, hoping for better infrastructure and discussions. Until then, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Chiji.
Thank you.
And Naosam.
No problem.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.